Hello, thank you for tuning in. This is going to be a quick reading using the Rider-Waite Coleman Smith cards. Today is December 23rd, 2025. I already pulled an 8-card spread with automatic clarifiers for core cards. For the overall theme, I have the 6 of Pentacles. The central issue is the Temperance card. The next 4 cards represent a chronology of time in 4 quarters. The first one is the Wheel of Fortune, then we have the 4 of Cups, then the Justice card, and then the Magician. For advice, we have the Page of Swords clarified by the Lovers card. And by the way, this is audio only. Sorry about that. Okay, but the last card here is the potential outcome following the advice, and that's the Judgment card. And I did kind of look over these cards already, and I got a message about, kind of long story short, it appears as though the cards are talking about a situation where someone may have come into contact in some way with a person who didn't treat them very well. So the querent came into contact with someone who didn't treat them very well. Not in a closely bonded interpersonal relationship. Could be like more of like a parasocial relationship, or just someone who bumped into them on the street and was rude, I don't think this is a loved one here. This is kind of a passerby in some sense. And I think I did pull some clarifiers, but I put them back in the deck. But those cards indicated, along with the Wheel of Fortune, that this is sort of like what I refer to as like a karmic test in some sense. And I may be misusing that term, but I just mean that I think of that as sort of like an opportunity to kind of test your skills in a sort of a spiritual sense, or like it's sort of like an opportunity to elevate yourself in a certain way in life, put it that way. So it would depend how the proverbial querent would receive that, would depend on their belief system, which can be whatever it is. So, but for someone who's more spiritual or religious, or you could even say magical thinking, they might think of it in those terms as like a karmic test, or some sort of transcendence and that sort of thing. Because I got this whole thing about, again, if you don't believe in that sort of thing, you can think of this as an analogy or a metaphor. But, excuse me, I got this whole scenario about, what just popped into my head is earning one's wings. And interestingly, there are so many pairs of wings in this spread. We have 3 angels here with the Temperance, the Lovers, and the Judgment card. And this is only 9 cards that I pulled. So 3 out of 9 cards are angels here. And then in the Wheel of Fortune, we have 4 winged beings. So someone's kind of, there's an opportunity for them to earn their wings by, and this is kind of what I got before, is this whole scenario about, it's kind of like a concept around unconditional love. So I'm trying to keep my thoughts organized here, but going back to this person of interest here, maybe they were rude to the querent in some way, almost a stranger. Um, but this stranger, it's a stranger to the querent, but the stranger has some sort of feeling of connection to the querent. Um, at the very least, the stranger was thinking some intense thoughts about the querent. Maybe they didn't like the way the querent looked or something, looked at them. It's kind of thing where, are you looking at me? Are you looking at me? Kind of a thing. Or it could be, again, parasocial. So it could be someone, they know they feel closer to the querent than the querent feels to them. But so the querent's experience with that other person, though, is not nice. Okay, sorry if I'm babbling here. Okay, but this concept came up where the nature of this test is as an opportunity to transcend is this idea or notion that you know, if you think of reality beyond on different planes of existence, and you think of, in the earth realm, most people are not telepathic. Most people are more self-centered. Okay, we look at the world, if we can see, or we use our whatever senses or faculties we have to interact with the world, from our own personal perspective. And the notion I got was that in the higher realms, as you go up, we become more and more connected. So the test on this earthly plane through this experience is to see how connected, for the queer to see how connected they are to others. How can they know that as they react? How do they react to this situation? Do they react, say you're walking down the street and someone bumps into your shoulder and it seems like they did it on purpose, and then they call you a mean name and keep walking. Now, do you turn around and walk back, catch up to them and then, shove them in the back of the head and call them a name and feel better about it? Or, do you keep walking in your direction and cry, and, resent the other person or resent the entire world? How do you react? That's the test. And, there's no wrong answer. It's just, it's more of an opportunity than a test. And the opportunity is to gain a greater understanding in a more powerful connection to the other. So, and how would the querent do that? They would seek to gain greater understanding about what motivated the other person. And that's not to say that, the other person is more important than the querent. On the contrary, it's saying they are connected. Everyone's connected, to some degree via where we're at or what our perception is at that point in time. So why do we have to do this on this plane? Because we're graduating to the next plane of existence where entities are more connected, where they are telepathic. But we can't graduate to that plane until we learn how to accept one another and understand one another. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good for people to be telepathic. And that's why most people aren't on this plane. Because we don't want to hear each other's thoughts because they hurt our feelings. Because we're self-centered. Have you ever noticed how when someone insults us personally, we have a very strong reaction compared to when we see someone say the same thing to someone else? We might still be appalled on their behalf, but we're, usually not as upset about it. So, for instance, I don't open my comments on these videos, but if I did, um, and someone commented on my video that I'm a moron, personally, that wouldn't hurt my feelings too much because I would probably just say, oh, smart, you're smart. But in general, I don't see myself as being that sensitive in that sense, but it would probably still bother me more than if someone else had just read that comment. Or, again, maybe they would, if they cared about me, maybe that comment would bother me. But if they didn't care about me, they didn't think of me, they just thought of me as a stranger. And, okay, I'm over explaining this. So the short story is, we tend to be more sensitive about how people treat us than because it's personal to us, because we have that egocentricity as human beings. I spoke so long about this that I forgot why I was talking about it at this point. Anyway, the querent is being called upon here to rise above the situation. And they're being called to, instead of being hurt by this, because it's not personal. And the cards are even telling me the person who was rude, the reason they were rude, and the point is the querent is supposed to understand this. The reason they were rude is because they felt rejected by the querent in some way. Now, the querent may not have actively even rejected this person. They probably feel like they never even interacted with this person. But the other person felt rejected by the person because they didn't get some sort of attention, and they thought that was rude or something. So it's kind of like, say the querent was the one who bumped into someone on the street and kept walking, but they didn't realize that it was a problem. They didn't think they hurt anyone. Maybe they didn't even notice it. And so the other person feels injured. And now they're lashing out because they feel like they were treated like a nobody, put it that way. So the querent is supposed to understand that the reason this person was rude to the querent was because of some misperceived slight or rejection. And now they're looking for negative attention because they didn't get positive attention before. Now they're looking for negative attention. They're trying to trigger the querent. They're trying to push their buttons, or they're trying to rile them up, get a rise out of them. That's the expression. But that's kind of a pun because the querent, in the big picture, in the overall scheme of things, an analogy would be that's the way we learn things on a spiritual level. We have these experiences as sort of like tests. And the querent, in order to pass this test, they just, one, turn the other cheek, walk away, and then take a little time out to understand the other person so that they can connect on a spiritual level, so that their is it a soul or spirit can learn how to, it's like taking one step closer to being telepathic or empathic. They're developing empathy, they're developing emotional intelligence, they're developing wisdom and understanding through this experience. Okay. I'm running out of time, so I will say goodbye, and I hope to see you again. I hope this helps someone out there. Very best wishes.